Up next in the broadcast, North Korea's human rights abuses officially make it to the agenda of the UN Security Council. The move to refer Pyongyang to the International Criminal Court now has 3 years to clear the final hurdle. With next year viewed as a golden opportunity for economic reforms, some analysts say comparisons to Japan-style deflation are a bit overblown and that risks from the U.S. monetary policy are moderate. And Pope Francis says he's fed up with the Vatican's bureaucracy, calling it sick with cowardly gossipers and power-hungry clerics who would backstab each other in cold blood. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Tae-ri.
I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us tonight. We begin with the United Nations Security Council's decision to put North Korea's human rights violations on its agenda, despite China and Russia voting against the move.
Exactly, as widely expected. And this means that the topic can be brought up anytime when deemed necessary for the next 3 years. Our Connie Lee starts us off.
It's official. North Korea's human rights issues are now part of the UN Security Council's agenda.
The DPRK is in effect a totalitarian state which uses violence and repression against its own citizens to maintain itself. The regime's atrocities against its own people have created an inherently unstable state.
Members of the council voted on Monday to formally take up the issue of Pyongyang's alleged human rights abuses. This despite objections from China and Russia. However, there are no vetoes in procedural votes like this one, where an agenda is being set, so the other members were able to override the objections. This is the first time that the top UN body has taken up North Korea's human rights issues. Previously, discussions on Pyongyang were solely centered on the North's nuclear weapons program, but now all aspects of the country will be monitored and discussed. The latest ruling could also serve as a prelude to punitive measures against Pyongyang in the future, as it comes a matter of days after the UN General Assembly voted in favor of referring North Korea to the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity. North Korea, which has refused to cooperate at every step, quickly denounced the decision. Monday's report follows a stinging UN report released in February that said North Koreans face unspeakable atrocities. These include forced labor in the country's prison camps, deliberate starvation, executions, and torture. This latest move ramps up international pressure on Pyongyang to finally treat its own people better. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
North Korea's internet was unplugged for about 10 hours on this Tuesday, although it's reportedly partially back online now. Some speculate Washington's involvement in all this after the recent hacking attack on Sony Pictures. Our Shin Se-min has more.
We will respond. We will respond proportionally, and we'll respond in a place and time and manner that we choose.
Days after U.S. President Barack Obama said he would take proportional measures against the cyber attack on Sony Pictures that's been blamed on North Korea, the communist state experienced its worst network collapse in years. North Korea has since gained full access to the internet, but only after 10 hours of disruptions. It's not yet clear what caused the outage. But suspicion immediately turned to the United States in light of the recent attack on Sony Pictures. Deputy spokesperson for the U.S. State Department Marie Harf declined to comment on the reports that North Korea had lost its internet access, but did say that as the U.S. implements its responses, some will be seen and some may not be seen. Access to the internet is limited in the North, and what is offered comes from a Chinese-run provider. Only a small number of people are allowed online, and very little commercial or government-related business is done on the web. For that reason, experts say the outage isn't expected to have any lasting economic effects on the North. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is blocking an opposition lawmaker from traveling to the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex tomorrow. The Unification Ministry says it rejected Representative Park Ji-won's request to visit the site because he already visited the north twice over the last 2 months. He was formally invited by Kim Yang-gun, North Korea's top official for inter-Korean issues, along with a dozen other South Korean delegates. Hyundai Group Chairwoman Hyun Jung-eun was also invited. Park was the only person whose request was rejected by the government.
Alarm bells for the Korean economy have been going off for months now, with many experts calling for structural reforms across the board. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on how next year could be the golden year for the government to forge ahead with those changes and breathe new life into the economy.
The Korean government is gearing up to tackle problems with the country's employment system head-on. Improving the labor market by addressing labor shortages, temporary positions, and the mismatch among employees and job seekers is a central part of the government's plan to maintain growth. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-won highlighted this issue again earlier this week when he laid out a set of comprehensive economic policy directives for 2015.
The government is trying to seek unity through structural reforms in the country's labor market and increase flexibility in the workforce, as well as job security.
The finance minister stated a need to bring flexibility to the workforce, as local companies are reluctant to hire employees for permanent positions because it's not easy to lay people off once they're hired. The move for sweeping labor reforms is becoming ever more important as dismal forecasts for the Korean economy are being projected of low growth and mounting concerns over the nation's fast-growing aging society. It's expected to help overcome some of the economic challenges Korea is facing, much like Britain had.
Well, if you take the UK, for example, they gave up a lot of rights that went to unions. They gave a lot of labor flexibility. They also liberalized a lot of the financial market. So they've been able to live off the financial market for about 20 or 30 years. That would probably not have been possible if they didn't have more labor flexibility.
And with next year being election-free, it may present a golden opportunity to carry out structural reforms, meaning the Park Geun-hye administration can focus less on wooing voters and more on implementing changes Korea needs. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Fitch Ratings says Korea has more room left for key rate cuts, while adding that Korea doesn't have to worry about deflationary pressure for now. Our Hwang Ji-hae spoke to the chief analyst for Asia-Pacific sovereigns at Fitch Ratings for further insights. Take a look.
So, Andrew, many here in Korea are drawing parallels between Korea and Japan, saying that Korea is close to the kind of slow growth and falling prices that its neighbors suffered from for 2 decades. Do you also agree with the comparison?
I think that comparison is rather overdone. We expect Korea's economy to grow about 3.7% this year, rising to 3.9% next year. And there are plenty of countries in the world that would be very happy to be growing at those kinds of rates. I think there's a risk of some months of negative price changes next year, partly as a result of the decrease in oil prices. But for an energy importing country like Korea, lower oil prices and perhaps even a temporary or mild deflation might not be such a bad thing.
So what should Korea focus more on, longer-term sustainable growth or boosting the short-term recovery momentum?
Well, it's not for us as a ratings agency to give policy advice, so that's an important point for us to stress. I think from our perspective, what I'd say is that Korea's degree or scope for policy flexibility, both on the monetary and on the fiscal side, is a strength in the credit profile. So compared to some of Korea's high-income advanced economy peers, the central bank has room to cut interest rates. Public debt is moderate. So the authorities have scope to use the budget to assist in economic management. more than is the case in many of the country's high-income peers.
Now, household debt, that is one of the major risks of the Korean economy. Could that possibly develop into a crisis that could threaten the stability of the country's financial industry?
Well, Korea does have quite a high degree of household debt compared to its peers, so roughly 90% of GDP in household debt, which is higher now than the US. Well, I think that how I view household debt is as something that decreases the economy's resilience to significant negative shock if one were to materialize. So from that point of view, it's something that weighs on the credit profile, weighs on the ratings.
And what risks could there be when the Fed actually starts to raise its key interest rate?
Thinking about financial market behavior, investors have tended to treat Korea as more of a safe haven. What I'm saying is that we don't view US monetary policy tightening as a risk for Korea in the same way as it is for some other countries in the Asia-Pacific region.
Now on to the latest development from Korean Air's nut rage incident. Prosecutors plan to request a provisional arrest warrant for Cho Hyun-ah, the former vice president of Korea's flagship carrier. They say this will happen tomorrow. She's facing charges of violating a number of aviation security laws, as well as allowing her aides to water down the scale of this case and tamper with evidence. Cho was thrust into spotlight earlier this month after making a Seoul-bound Korean Air flight turn back to the gate after getting upset that a flight attendant did not serve macadamia nuts according to protocol. She is the eldest daughter of the airline's CEO, Cho Yang-ho. With the film industry here in Korea thrives, the competition within grows fierce. That said, Korea's regulatory authority has slapped millions of dollars in fines on two of Korea's biggest movie chains for unfair practices. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
Korea's two biggest movie chains, CGV and Lotte Cinema, have been fined a combined $5 million for engaging in unfair practices. These practices include giving affiliate distributors more screens to show their movies and allowing them to screen the films for longer periods of time. The Fair Trade Commission said the moves gave CGV and Lotte Cinema an unfair advantage at the box office. The FTC pointed to two hits in particular: CJ E&M's Masquerade, a 2012 film that attracted more than 10 million viewers, and Lotte Entertainment's The Taste of Money, which was released that same year on triple the number of screens than competing films. The watchdog said the two movie chains also gave out free movie discount coupons without the consent of distributors.
It's meaningful because the Commission is taking strong legal action for the first time against the unfair practices of large, vertical, integrated cinema chains.
Following up on the fines, the Culture Ministry says it'll more closely monitor the screening practices of Korean movie chains to ensure that no benefits are being handed down to affiliates. The case has put the oligopoly of the Korean film industry back in the spotlight. The top three multiplexes in Korea make up more than 90% of screen shares in the country. And about 30% of all films produced each year aren't even released in theaters. Experts say a new platform for independent, low-budget films is needed for diversification.
I think it is a great idea for major companies to build theaters only for smaller films, but not if it's merely a temporary measure to avoid the separation between distribution and screening.
And market watchers say if these theaters reserved for small firms are given enough support, a positive synergy effect in the industry can be created. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And speaking of movies, breaking the 100 million admission mark used to be a dream goal for the Korean film industry, but now it's not so out of the question. That's because more than 100 million tickets have been sold this year for the third year in a row. Park Ji-won has the story.
More than 100 million tickets have been sold for Korean films at cinemas this year, marking the third straight year of achieving the milestone.
I came to see the Korean film Ode to My Father, which is currently #1 at the box office.
I'm proud that in terms of special effects, plots, and visual themes, I feel that Korean films now are as good as foreign films.
Last year, the number of people buying tickets for domestically produced films exceeded the 100 million mark in early October. This year, it took a couple more months to reach the mark. Korean films got off to a relatively slow start this year, especially compared to Hollywood blockbuster releases, such as the latest Transformers movie and the 7th installment of the X-Men movies. However, the tide started to turn as we got further into 2014, with the opening of the period action film The Admiral Roaring Currents. The film sold more than 17 million domestic tickets over the summer, a record for a Korean film. Another Korean action film, The Pirates, was also an overwhelming success, selling more than 8 million tickets.
Last year, we had several Korean films attracting 3 to 4 million viewers. But this year, The Admiral Roaring Currents achieved that figure on its own. 2014 has been marked by the success of a small handful of films, pushing us to the 100 million mark.
The popularity of Korean films is continuing into December as well, with the heart-wrenching drama set during the Korean War, Ode to My Father, and the documentary film, My Love, Don't Cross That River. 박지원, Arirang News.
Pope Francis has launched a scathing critique of the Vatican's bureaucracy, saying it's been infected with what he described as a culture of hypocrisy and greed.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Pope Francis has been on a mission to reform the Roman Catholic Church since he was elected last year. What other tough words did he have to offer?
Well, during his annual Christmas meeting, Pope Francis delivered a remarkably blunt speech. He accused some senior Vatican clerics of using their careers to seize money and power, while stressing the need for things to change and improve. But some see the Pontiff's latest comments as a sign that he's being met with opposition from within the church. Our Chi Myung-gil has more.
Pope Francis has offered up a blistering critique on the cardinals, bishops, and priests who run the Curia, the central administration of the Roman Catholic Church. The Pope said some of the church's bureaucrats were infected with 15 ailments, as he called them, headlined by gossip.
Gossip is a serious disease that starts with a thread and grabs the whole person. It is the sickness of the cowards who, not having enough courage to speak directly, speak behind people's backs.
Pope Francis also called out power-hungry clerics who he said will kill the reputation of their colleagues and brothers in cold blood for their own greed or success. He said some were suffering from spiritual Alzheimer's and that they forgot what first brought them into the priesthood. To cure the ails that plague the church, the Pope called for reforms.
A curia that does not do any self-criticism, that does not renew itself, and does not try to improve itself is a sick body.
The Pope is hoping to use cardinal advisors he has appointed to fight corruption and poor management within the church. Part of the reforms may include reining in the curia's power, which has been concentrated in Rome for centuries, giving bishops around the world a bigger say in Roman Catholic Church doctrine. Chi Myung-gil, Arirang News.
And in the United States, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has called for unity in the wake of the recent deaths of 2 police officers who were gunned down in their squad car. The mayor has been taking heavy criticism for allegedly not doing enough to protect law enforcement personnel following the Michael Brown and Eric Garner cases. In an effort to ease tensions, he's asked for all protests against police violence to be suspended until after the funerals for the slain policemen. At a press conference on Monday, de Blasio asked people to put aside politics and support the families of the 2 officers who were killed Saturday in Brooklyn.
And we have to understand the attack on them was an attack on all of us. It was an attack on our democracy. It was an attack on our values. It was an attack on every single New Yorker. And we have to see it as such.
As for the shooter in the case, an investigation into the motive of the suspect, Ismail Brinsley, is ongoing. Police Commissioner William Branton says Brinsley acted alone and that he was full of anti-government and anti-police sentiment. And finally, turning to China, President Xi Jinping is continuing his campaign to root out state corruption in the country, this time targeting a top advisor to former President Hu Jintao. The ruling Communist Party's anti-corruption watchdog launched on Monday a probe into Ling Xihua for what it described as an unspecified disciplinary violation. Ling, who was virtually the chief of staff to the former president, came into the spotlight more than 2 years ago when he tried to cover up a scandal involving his son who died in a speed car accident. And speculation about his fate ran high after the announcement of a probe into his two brothers back in June. Authorities have intensified their campaign to tackle corruption among officials since President Xi took office, with several senior government figures and state company executives now in detention. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome, I'm Stephen Che with a look at sports. A number of Korean footballers played on the biggest stages across the world this year, but two players stood out the most and were honored for their spectacular play. The Korea Football Association named Son Heung-min the top male and Ji So-yeon the top female football player of the year, both for the second straight time. Son continued his rise up Bayer Leverkusen's ranks, netting 11 goals in 26 contests for the German squad, including 3 in the Champions League. Meanwhile, Ji So-yeon dazzled with 9 goals in her debut season for England's Chelsea ladies, who finished second in the league. And that brings us to the KBL. The ET-Land Elephants faced off against the Samsung Thunders in Incheon for Tuesday's lone matchup. And a fast start and a 17-point lead by the Elephants at halftime turns into 37 by the last period. And the Elephants go on to smash the Thunders by 54 points, the biggest score difference in KBL history, to even up their record at 14-14. And over to pro volleyball with 2 matches taking place also in Incheon. Let's first jump to the ladies. The Hunguk Life Pink Spiders beat the GS Caltex Kicks the last time out, but this time the Kicks were in command. They dominate the Spiders for the straight sets win. Meanwhile, the Uri Card Hanse shocked the Korean Air Jumbos in 4 sets to get their first victory in over 6 weeks. With it, they earn only their second win of the season. Finishing with football overseas, Chelsea has topped the Premier League standings before the Christmas holiday, and history shows they're primed for the title. After beating Stoke City 2-0, the Blues have 42 points after 17 matches. It's their 4th time leading the league by Christmas. The last 3 times, they took home the title, with the latest coming from the 2009-10 season. In the Premier League's 22-year history, the league leaders at Christmas won 10 times, and all but 1 team finished outside of the top 4. And that wraps it up for sports. Your weather's up next. Have a good night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the weather updates. Overall, this month has been colder than the seasonal average, but relief is in sight as we will finally get a break from the cold snap. Well, at the moment, the nation is under cloudy skies. Also, dry weather advisories continue to be in effect for Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. So if you're in those areas, make sure to stay hydrated. Christmas is just around the corner and light snow is forecast for the central regions early tomorrow morning, but it won't be enough for a white Christmas. Otherwise, be careful on your morning commutes as flurries could lead to icy road conditions. Looking ahead, it looks like moderate conditions will stick around for the rest of the week. On to tomorrow's ratings. Seoul will mix it to 6, Gwangju hits 9, Busan reaches 12. On to other places. Daejeon mixed it to 7, while Jeju hits 12, Mount Kumgang dips to -3.
That's all the updates I have for you now. Join me for more after midnight. See you then.
Thank you very much, Pyongyang, and that's Primetime News for this Tuesday. I'm Kang Tae-ri. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Sean Lim. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.